Hello, welcome to the Damian and Devlin show, and this is our review of Star Wars.
A New Hope.
Written and directed by George Lucas, starring Mark Hamill, Carrie Fisher, Harrison Ford, and Alec Guinness. And this is the 1977 space opera that, of course, who hasn't heard of Star Wars? This is the movie that started off this phenomenon, and we decided we were going to tackle it today because both Damian and I are both Star Wars fans. And with the new Solo movie hitting theaters soon, we thought this was a good week to debut this review. Now, we both picked it, so, we both have a different love for this. Why don't you talk a little bit about it, and then I'll tell you my first experiences with Star Wars.
Sure. For those of you that have seen our review of The Force Awakens, you should know that both of us are huge Star Wars fans, and I think actually, remembering that review, I made mention of the fact that the only person I've ever met in my entire life that's a bigger Star Wars fan than me is this guy right here. Because up until I'd met Devlin, I loved Star Wars so much. I knew all the ins and outs, and this was before Disney bought it, so I even knew about the extended universe and all that. But literally, his knowledge about it and his love for the series as a whole completely outshone mine, and I was completely fine with that. One thing that we actually did find in common is that not only are we a fan of at the time, Force Awakens had not come out. I don't even think it was rumored to be out yet when we first met. But we loved the current movies. We loved the past movies. We liked all of the Star Wars movies. We liked the TV shows and everything about it. So we got to talking, and I do remember specifically, I went up to him at one point and I said, "Let me tell you something a little bit about the prequel movies." And he said, "Don't even get me started, blah, 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 blah." And I actually said, "You know what, I actually like the prequel movies." And he kind of stopped for a moment, got the gears turning in his head. And it led to so much more. But the fact is, we both love Star Wars. And I saw Star Wars the way that I think, and a lot of people will agree with me on this, the way that it should be watched. And that is episode 4, 5, and 6. Then you watch episode 1, 2, 3. Then you watch episode 7 and 8. I know it sounds convoluted for those of you that have never watched Star Wars. Believe it or not, folks, there are those people out there that have not seen Star Wars. But that's how you should experience Star Wars, in my opinion. And in the majority of Star Wars fans' opinion as well. You should watch them that way. And so I am actually glad that as a kid, my mom made me watch A New Hope first. I never got the ability to see episodes 1 until 1999 when it came out. So when growing up as a kid, the prequel movies were the ones that I did grow up with. But because my mom knew of Star Wars before that, she had bought me the VHSs. They were the special editions. So I had seen the special editions. I hadn't seen the original cut theatrical release many years later. But I saw 4, 5, and 6 first. And that's how I think you should watch it. And since we have actually just watched A New Hope, going back to it after all these years, so I know it came out in 77, and then it had its re-release in 1997. I think that's when the special editions came out.
In there, yeah.
That's when those came out. And then, of course, there was the re-release again on DVD in, I think, 2004. And then, of course, the subsequent Blu-ray complete saga release where again it was updated again. So many revisions have been made to this movie, but
and I owned them all.
I
paid for at least a chair in Lucas's place from the amount I saw it at the theater and how many times I had to re-buy the series because they changed one thing.
Despite the fact that there have been so many revisions to this movie, not only is it an iconic film in its own right, but it's exactly what a movie should be. It's from beginning to end, an interesting, exciting adventure between good and evil. And I'll let you take the reins from here because I know you love this movie.
Just a little background on me beforehand. My dad and I used to have a tradition. I saw Star Wars when I was 9 years old, and our tradition was Sundays we used to go to movies. And I used to only see animated or kids movies until 77 when Star Wars came out, and I bugged him. And finally my brother said, "You know what? He can handle it. It's a PG movie." But my dad, they were very strict on that. They finally took me, and I just was blown away. Here's this little kid who only saw animated stuff, and I'm seeing ships flying over me. I'm seeing new worlds and stuff. And so I credit Star Wars not only with being this amazing film, but it opened me up as a film fan. After that, my dad was Selenian, and we saw dramas and comedies and musicals and action and whatever. So not only does this movie sentimental for me for that, but it just, this is my love of movies. And it's a simple, basic story about a farm boy who goes on a quest and meets various people. It is so simplistic, but it's just the simplicity that wins you over. It's a fairy tale come true. And they kind of mix science fiction with space opera and real good, strong characters. What are your positives for Star Wars A New Hope? Which, the reason Damian said A New Hope is because I feel weird calling it A New Hope, because I knew it when it was just Star Wars. Nobody knew there would be sequels. George hoped there would be, but so it's still weird to call it A New Hope, because when I saw it was just Star Wars.
Well, I'm glad that there were sequels, and you know, growing up with it as an already established franchise, you had A New Hope, you had Empire Strikes Back, you had Return of the Jedi. It was hard as a kid not to imagine that there would be more, especially when watching the special editions on VHS. It opened up with Episode 4, A New Hope, Episode 5, Empire Strikes Back. As a kid, I kept thinking to myself, where's Episodes 1, 2, and 3? And then 1999 came around with Episode 1, and then I started getting really, really into the Star Wars hype, because that's what basically drew me down the rabbit hole into the whole love of Star Wars. My positives with regards to A New Hope in general, you know what? It's not that I'm having a hard time naming positives. There are so many positives to name. That's why I'm having a hard time. First and foremost, let me start off with saying the special effects. I can't even imagine how amazing they were in 1977, because even to this day, some of the special effects look phenomenal.
Yeah. We should say that the movie we watched was the Blu-ray special edition, so there was the additions to it, but I just wanted to
some of them are a little quirky, and I'm going to talk about them, but for the most part, the special effects are phenomenal. And I have actually seen the theatrical release, so the original 77 version, and even then, they look really good. Like when I see spaceships flying through space, I see the Death Star off in the distance. I can imagine that they are looking through a cockpit at the Death Star, so the special effects are astounding. Let's go right to the music. Who has not heard a Star Wars song? Whether it's the opening crawl, whether it's the Imperial March, the ending theme, somebody somewhere has heard a song from Star Wars. It's just iconic, and it's brilliant. John Williams does the score, and he, like I've talked about him before, he went on to do Jurassic Park. He does so many great scores.
He will be remembered as probably one of the greatest movie composers ever. If you just, Star Wars, like you said, Jurassic Park, Jaws, Superman, E.T., like iconic. Not just like big movies, these are iconic.
Absolutely. And you know, there's something special about Star Wars music too, because it's John Williams, and you can tell it's John Williams because he always has a kind of whimsical, magical feeling when it comes to his songs. And there's just something magical in itself about Star Wars music. It makes you literally feel like you're not on Earth when watching these movies. It makes you feel like you're literally going on this, as you called it, a space operatic journey through the cosmos with these characters. That's how magical the music is. And I love the music. I have many of the soundtracks, and they're just magical to listen to, even on their own, without watching the movie behind it. Blah, blah, blah. Getting so tongue-tied because I love the music so much. But it's just magical. I love the experience of that. The characters, how could you not have gone through your entire life without hearing of Darth Vader, Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, Princess Leia, Chewbacca, R2-D2, C-3PO? There's so many characters that came from this movie alone. And if you haven't heard of these characters, honestly, even if you have not seen Star Wars, that's fine. It's impossible to have not heard of Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker. at the very least. If you have not, you must be living on Mars in a cave with your eyes closed and fingers in your ears. That's how impossible it is. These characters are iconic, and they are very good for this movie by itself. They get better as time goes on, and they get more developed as more movies come out and whatnot, and you learn more about them, and they develop nuances. Let's not talk about The Last Jedi, though, because that's not fair. But the characters from this movie alone are phenomenal, and I love each and every single one of them, including the bad guys, and I'm going to talk about that more in a bit. I love the script. Like you said, very simple. Farm boy goes on a quest to rescue a princess and take on the big bad guys of the galaxy, which are the Empire. It's just simple, wonderful, and it works. And another thing, actually rewatching this movie, the original, it's edgy. The original actually has an edge to it, and I like that edge. There's a scene where it shows burned corpses. Like, full on, they were set on fire and burned to death by the Empire. And then you see a mass slaughter by the stormtroopers. The stormtroopers executed a whole bunch of Jawas at some point. Like, that's edgy. And also, like, Han's thrown out. I know it's not a big thing, but he's saying, to hell with this, and damn it, and things like that. It's edgy. Because at the time, I guess in 77, it was its own standalone product. Like you said,
yeah.
Lucas hoped there'd be sequels, but he didn't know. And so when you get to Empire, it's still a little edgy in Empire, but it's toned down a little bit. And then Return of the Jedi, severely toned down for the kids because it gained that huge following and it became a family-friendly product. But I do like the edginess of this original A New Hope.
Is that your positives?
For now, yeah. I like I said, there's so many positives about
it's almost hard to talk about this movie, but this is going to be a love letter to George Lucas in so many ways. And he deserves it. Not only did he create a great first movie, but he, like the whole franchise, even though he has nothing to do with the newer films, we still owe everything to this one simple movie. That when he was making it, they didn't even know if it was going to have an audience. They didn't know if science fiction fans would embrace it because science fiction was a little bit more higher tech and stuff like Star Trek and Planet of the Apes and Logan's Run, that kind of stuff. So a lot of people didn't even know, even when they were filming. And I remember Harrison Ford said that nobody on the thing thought this was going to go anywhere. It was just going to play matinees and that's it. This thing has become a juggernaut. And, from like even how they release films, how they merchandise films is all because of this. If you want to even go further, how many people have become special effects artists? How many become writers? How many just because they grew up with Star Wars? And so George Lucas, whether you agree with him with some of the stuff he did for the prequels or some of the stuff he did, he deserves to be commended for this. He wrote and directed this. And another thing people forget about is Star Wars wasn't just a big international hit that changed the movie-going ways. Star Wars was actually nominated for 11 Academy Awards and won 7 of them. Now, they won all the technical awards, but Star Wars was up for Best Picture. George Lucas was up for Best Director. The screenplay was up for Best Writing, and Alec Guinness got a Best Supporting Actor. It's almost hard now to think that we still haven't seen that. Every once in a while you see like a Heath Ledger get an award for, the Joker. But back in 77, it was almost unheard of for a science fiction movie to get that many nominations. So yeah, a lot of commendations to that. John Williams, you've already touched on it. We have got to say stuff about him. Great choices of actors. A lot of newcomers. Carrie Fisher was just starting out. Mark Hamill had only done TV work. Harrison Ford had a small part in George Lucas's American Graffiti. And George doesn't really like to work with people after he's worked with them before, like in a new project. So he kept kind of pushing Harrison Ford off for him because we worked together already. Just like, it was Spielberg that wanted Harrison Ford for Indy, but he kept saying, no, I've worked with Harrison. It's just how George is. He's kind of a quirky guy. But a great cast. And just some of the imagery, like the characters, like not just how awesome the characters are, but the costume that's Chewbacca is phenomenal. I actually always forget it's a costume because at 9 years old, this was a Wookiee. And even now, I'm 50, I still see a Wookiee.
Yeah.
I don't think of it as a costume. I've never seen any like zippers or anything that makes me think. Even when I see promotionals with him with his head off, which are very rare, it's awesome.
When I found out that, I don't know the actor's name, and I know he passed a few years ago, but the man that sits inside and drives R2-D2 around, when I found out there was a little man inside there, Kenny Baker, controlling R2, it blew my mind.
Yeah.
Because that's how well R2 is put together.
Yeah. And I actually, like, Carrie Fisher's passing, Kenny Baker's passing, just kind of wiped me out because it was a part of my youth and stuff. The design of the robots too. C-3PO does never come off as nothing but a robot to me. R2 is a robot, but again, you don't think of a little person in there in some of the sequences. Darth Vader's costume, how iconic and how repeated has that been? There he is right there, Damian's favorite there. And it's just an amazing, like, all the production values, the Millennium Falcon, the X-Wing, the Stormtrooper, like, I can just go on about even the smaller things, the weird little characters in the bars. Some of them don't work, but that makes them work even more because it's like, I kind of want to visit this planet.
Yeah.
Like, this is on. So, for all the technical people and stuff, it's so amazing. I better stop because I could go on for hours, and you guys pretty much probably could guess what I'm going to give this in stars. So let's see if we got some negatives. I know you will have some.
So I do have some negatives. Yeah. Now, the biggest thing, I do want to touch on this just because some of the backlash towards the special editions, I feel, are not based on fair merit. I feel like some of the additions to the special editions, this is not just dealing with the New Hope, this is Empire, this is Return of the Jedi, they add to the movie and they make it more magical. We were talking about, there's a scene of X-Wings and Y-Wings flying towards the Death Star. That was a special edition. And that just is so beautiful, first of all, and it's so wonderful. You wouldn't get that. You don't get it in the theatrical version, and it just adds to it. But some of the changes, yes, I will agree, some of the changes are a little weird. So this was my first time actually seeing the Blu-ray release. I'd only ever seen the DVD release before. There's an instance where R2, I remember it from the the DVD release as well as the VHS. He's hiding in a cave, and on the Blu-ray release, he's got like all these rocks in front of him that have been superimposed, and I could tell that they've been superimposed over him, and it looks bad. And some of the changes, like, yes, some of the CGI hasn't aged very well. That's to be expected, but ultimately I'm going to say, as another positive, I know I'm talking about my negative, so the negative that I'll have to say with regards to the additions, definitely the superimposed rocks in front of R2. They look stupid. And it makes no sense for R2 to have gotten into where he's gotten into.
Especially when they show the shots from inside the cave and there's no rocks in front of him.
Kenobi goes, come on out of there, come on out of there. I was expecting clang, bang, whang.
Yeah, I don't know what they were thinking of with that. Like, did he put the rocks there? Like,
Some of the additions I really do enjoy. Another negative of mine, and this is just because I know so much about Star Wars, the lightsaber that Kenobi has. He cuts somebody's arm off at one point in the movie, and it shows the arm lying on the ground, and there's blood. Now, because I know so much about Star Wars and the universe and how long it's been since the first one came out, the lightsaber, when it cuts, it cauterizes instantly, so there should be no blood. Now, you might say, oh, that's because they hadn't thought about it back then. But then I bring up the point, they've made so many changes. With the special editions, they couldn't remove the blood.
That's a good point. Yeah,
so
that's a good point.
That's a negative for me. With regards to anything else, no, there's not much else that I can think of. This movie is fantastic. Oh, wait, yes, there is. And you're going to hate me for this.
No,
you're going to hate me for this. I'm doing it. But, okay, when The Force Awakens came out, they talked about Rey being a Mary Sue. Let's talk about Luke
No.
being a Mary Sue for a second.
I didn't even think you were going down this rabbit hole, but
Yeah,
this is
I'm going here. Luke, as much as I love Luke, I do love Luke. He's fantastic. He's great. He's excellent. But he's a Mary Sue.
No, he's not.
He is.
He makes mistakes that cost people their lives.
So does Ray at that same point.
They do
now,
not.
Going on with the Mary Sue. Now, I personally, if you want to call them Mary Sues, go right ahead. If you're thinking about it within the actual in-universe, you can say, you know what? They have the Force on their side. That's why they're able to do all these things. And I'll give that to you. Yes, that's potentially it. But here we have the Rebel Alliance about to make a last desperate attack on the Death Star. And let's just throw this farm kid in there in an X-Wing fighter. And then just like hope that it turns out pretty good. And turns out like this kid's naturally gifted somehow in an X-Wing fighter he's never flown before, and he makes the killing blow. Like, give me a break. Give me a break. He can fly these other ships. He talks about, oh, I'm a great pilot throughout the entire movie.
Shooting womp rats.
But nobody ever sees him do it. So that's the only problem I really have with Luke, is that he talks about all these things, how great he is at it, and he turns out to be great at it, but how? How is my my question with that? So go ahead and throw your comments at me and your controversies at me. I know he's festering under this.
I am, because it's ridiculous.
It's not ridiculous.
He gets people killed. He gets people killed
So
because
does
of
Ray.
his mistake. No, she doesn't.
She
Watch
does.
the movies again.
I have watched them with you.
Anyhow, my negatives, there's really not many except for some of the things you said. I agree with a lot of George Lucas's choices for the special editions. I am one of the people that think that he did actually improve a lot of the stuff he did, but there is like R2 with the rocks. In later sequels, he actually changes dialogues and stuff, and that's something I'm not a big fan of. So my real only negative is that maybe watch a little bit of the special editions. The fact that we have to talk about Star Wars and say, well, the VHS version was different than the DVD, and then the second DVD release version was different than this, and then the special edition is not like the theatrical. The fact that there's so many, just agree on one. He's changed it so many times, and that's the only negative I'm going to have for this.
So I did think of another negative, and you'll agree with me on this one, is that the Empire is just stupid. Like, they are literally the worst military organization, and I'm an Empire fan. Like, I don't like the Rebel Alliance. I'm the very first one to say, like, oh, those Rebel scum, and, like, if you are a Rebel supporter, I kind of look down on you a little bit, not gonna lie. But the Empire is just stupid.
How can you hate the good guys?
So,
this is a movie where all these little kids love idolizing the... No, go ahead.
Here's why I don't like the rebels. First of all, they're terrorists. Okay? Terrorists. I don't support terrorism. And second of all, they're this hapdash bunch of guerrillas that just decide to become a military force one day. Like, there's really no structure there until like later on when they start to become successful. They're the luckiest people in the world because the Empire's so stupid. Like, they've got 20 ships that go after the Death Star. The Death Star has like a whole fleet, and then they only send out 10 TIE fighters to defend it. Like, you're asking to be destroyed at this point. As well, the Stormtroopers are the most inaccurate troops I've ever seen in my entire life. Like, there's an actual term called the Stormtrooper effect because of this movie. Like, the Stormtroopers will aim and then miss. Like, they're just bad. But I love them. They're my faction. I know you're a Rebel supporter. And you know what? We'll agree to disagree, but my faction is more badass than you because we're burning people. We're straight up executing you. You know, we're awesome. We're awesome.
Yeah, bad guys are better than good guys. That's the way it is in the world. Let's idolize evil.
They're not evil. The regular Stormtrooper is just doing his job.
Anyhow, we will agree to disagree. So what do you give this on a...
I'm giving it a 4.5. It's a 4.5. So I can't let go of the... It was just weird seeing those rocks in front of R2, and literally it was a humorous moment when it shouldn't have been. And then also just the Empire being stupid just brings me out of it every time. I'm like, you guys could have prevented a tragedy, but you just were too stupid to do so. Maybe it's because they think they're invulnerable and that's what leads to their downfall. But the stupid decisions from the Empire brings it down with the plot a little bit. So 4.5. It's a fantastic movie, one of my favorites.
Well, since I saw Star Wars at 9, there's only a few movies that have ever made me feel this way again. And they don't come along too often. And I think the magic is still there. Even watching this, I remembered being that 9-year-old kid again and just, voting for the heroes and, remember getting all chills and stuff, whenever they do something successful. So since there isn't any real big nostalgia, there's no real surprise here. I'm going to give this a 5. So
justified. I would say that is completely justified. Out of all your 5s that you've given, this one I totally agree with. Absolutely fantastic movie. And if you haven't seen Star Wars, definitely treat yourself to it. It is an experience you have to live through. And that's just, if you like movies, you have to see Star Wars. If you don't like movies, see Star Wars, because this could be the movie that makes you into a movie lover. It could change your life forever. You never know. So give it a shot. Watch it 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 7, 8, and then eventually you can go off to Rogue One, Solo, see all the other side stories. But definitely watch them. They are definitely something that you need to experience. We love having you with us on this cosmic journey through the stars. You are our hero, so thank you so much for joining us every single week. We love having you. We like to hear what you have to say about it too, so let us know in the comments. Subscribe, follow us on social media. I'm going to get that word right eventually, I do promise. Thank you again for joining us. May the Force be with you.